The fluorescent lights of Sterling Associates hung their monotonous tunes. Maya Richardson adjusted the stack of legal briefs on her desk. 6 years at the firm had taught her to find comfort in routine, to bury herself in work when home felt too heavy to think about. Her wedding ring caught the light as she reached for her coffee mug, a simple gold band that had once symbolized forever, but now felt more like a shackle she learned to ignore. Across the office floor, through the maze of cubicles and glass partitions, Daniel Carter watched her with the same quiet intensity he perfected over 3 years. He joined Sterling Associates as a senior analyst, full of ambition and professional dreams. But somewhere between quarterly reports and late-night project deadlines, his focus had shifted. It had shifted to her, to the way Maya tucked her dark hair behind her ear when she was concentrating, to the sadness that flickered across her face when she thought no one was looking, to the forced smile she wore like armor every Monday morning. Daniel had never meant to fall in love with a married woman. It wasn't part of his plan, wasn't written in any playbook he'd ever studied. But love, he'd learn it, didn't ask for permission. It simply arrived, uninvited and overwhelming, turning his world into a constant exercise in restraint. He loved her in the spaces between words, in the professional emails that never said what he really meant, in the coffee he'd leave on her desk during particularly brutal deadlines, with nothing more than a sticky note that read, "You've got this." Maya noticed these small kindnesses more than Daniel could ever know. In a marriage that had grown cold and distant, where her husband David barely looked up from his phone during dinner, where conversations had been replaced by silence and resentment, Daniel's gestures felt like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. She told herself it was just office friendship, just professional courtesy, but her heart knew better. Her heart recognized the way Daniel's eyes lingered a fraction too long, the way his voice softened when he said her name, the way he always seemed to appear when she needed someone most. It was a Thursday afternoon, rain streaking down the office windows, when everything shifted imperceptibly. Maya had just received a text from David, canceling their anniversary dinner. 7 years of marriage, and he'd forgotten. Again, she stared at her phone, willing herself not to cry. Not here, not at work where she'd built such careful walls around her emotions. Daniel saw the change in her expression from across the room. Without thinking, without planning, he walked to her desk. "Maya," he said softly, and something in his voice made her look up. Their eyes met, and in that moment, an entire conversation happened in silence. He saw her pain, she saw his concern, and beneath it all, they both felt the dangerous current that had been building between them for years. "I'm fine," she whispered, but her voice cracked on the last word. "No, you're not," Daniel replied, his voice gentle but certain. "And you don't have to be, not with me." Those words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning and possibility. Maya felt something inside her chest break and bloom simultaneously. She was married, he was patient, and they both knew they were standing on the edge of something that could change everything. That evening, as Maya drove home to her empty house and her distant husband, she couldn't stop thinking about the way Daniel had looked at her, like she mattered, like she was worth waiting for, like she was seen. And for the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine what it might feel like to be loved the way she deserved. Daniel Saturday in his apartment, staring at the city lights, making himself a promise. He wouldn't push, he wouldn't cross lines that couldn't be uncrossed, but he also wouldn't walk away, because some loves, he realized, were worth the waiting, even if that wait broke his heart a little more each day. The unbearable in between. Months passed like a slow-motion collision, where every day brought Maya and Daniel closer, while the world around them demanded they stay apart. The office became their sanctuary and their torture chamber, a place where they could exist in each other's orbit, while maintaining the careful distance that propriety required. Maya's marriage continued its slow decay. David had taken a promotion that required constant travel, and when he was home, he was present only in body. They lived like roommates who'd forgotten why they'd ever chosen to share space. Conversations were transactional, touch was non-existent. Maya had suggested counseling twice. David had dismissed it both times, insisting they were just going through a phase, that all marriages hit rough patches, that she was being dramatic. But Maya didn't feel dramatic, she felt dead inside, like she was watching her own life from behind glass. except for the moments with Daniel. Those moments made her feel dangerously alive. They'd started having lunch together every Tuesday. It had begun innocently enough, a casual invitation that became a ritual neither wanted to break. They'd sit in the small cafe 2 blocks from the office, talking about everything and nothing. Daniel told her about his dreams of starting his own consultant firm someday. Maya confessed her abandoned dream of writing a novel. They laughed over shared memories of disastrous client presentations. They fell silent over cups of coffee that had gone cold while they forgot to drink them, lost in conversations that fed something deeper than hunger. "Why did you marry him?" Daniel asked one Tuesday, the question slipping out before he could stop it. He immediately looked apologetic. "I'm sorry, that was inappropriate." Maya shook her head, surprising herself with her honesty. "No, it's okay. I've asked myself the same question 1,000 times." She stared into her cup, as if the answer might be floating there. "I married him because I was 24, and he was ambitious and my parents approved, and it seemed like the right next step. I married the idea of a life, not the reality of a person, and by the time I realized the difference, I was too committed to walk away." "You don't owe anyone your unhappiness," Daniel said quietly. His hand moved across the table, stopping just short of touching hers. "You know that, right?" Maya felt tears prick her eyes. "Then why does leaving feel like failing?" "Because you have a good heart," Daniel answered. "Because you're loyal and you believe in keeping promises." "But Maya, what about the promise you made to yourself? To be happy, to be loved, to be more than just this?" She finally looked up at him, and the emotion in his eyes nearly undid her. "Daniel," she whispered, and his name on her lips felt like a confession. "We can't." "I know," he said, but his voice was rough with everything they weren't saying. "I know we can't, but that doesn't change how I feel. It doesn't change the fact that I think about you every moment of every day. That seeing you smile feels like winning the lottery. That watching you hurt because of him is killing me." Maya's hand trembled as she finally closed the distance between them, her fingers touching his across the table. It was the first time they'd ever touched with intention, and the connection felt electric. "I think about you too," she admitted. "More than I should, more than is right." They Saturday like that, hands touching across a cafe table, to people caught in an impossible situation. Daniel wanted to ask her to leave her marriage, to choose him, to start the life they both imagined in their private moments, but he could see the conflict in her eyes, the weight of her vows, the fear of the unknown, and because he loved her, truly loved her, he stayed silent. That night, Maya lay awake next to her sleeping husband, feeling more alone than she'd ever felt in her life. David snored softly, his back to her, an entire continent of distance between them in a queen-sized bed. She thought about Daniel's words, about promises to herself, about what it meant to choose happiness over obligation. Meanwhile, Daniel Saturday at his kitchen counter, writing an email he'd never send. "I would wait forever if I thought there was a chance," he typed. "I would be patient through 1,000 tomorrows if you needed me to be. But Maya, I'm terrified that we're going to wait so long that we forget how to want anything at all. I'm terrified that one day you'll realize you spent your whole life being loyal to the wrong person." He deleted the email without saving it. Some truths were too heavy to put into words, too dangerous to release into the world. So Daniel did what he'd been doing for years. He waited. He loved her from a distance. He broke his own heart a little more each day, and he told himself it was worth it, because the alternative, a world without Maya in it at all, was unthinkable. The unbearable in between stretched on, neither ending nor beginning, just existing in a painful present where love lived but couldn't breathe. Too late, too long, the decision came on an ordinary Wednesday morning, which seemed fitting somehow. Life-changing moments rarely announced themselves with fanfare. Maya walked into David's home office, where he was already on his laptop despite the early hour, and said the words that had been building in her chest for months. "I want a divorce." David looked up, not with shock or pain, but with something closer to irritation. "Is this about the couples therapy again?" "Maya, I told you I don't have time for that nonsense." "It's not nonsense," Maya said, her voice steady despite her shaking hands. "And no, this isn't about therapy. This is about the fact that we haven't had a real conversation in 6 months, that you've forgotten our last 3 anniversaries, that we're strangers who share an address. You're being dramatic, David said, already turning back to his screen. Every marriage goes through phases. You feel different next week. I felt like this for 2 years, Maya replied, and I'm done pretending that's normal. I'm done being invisible in my own marriage. That got his attention. David closed his laptop, his expression hardening. There's someone else, isn't there? Maya hesitated. There's someone else I could have had. Someone who sees me, who values me. But no, I haven't been unfaithful. I've been loyal to a marriage that's been dead for years, and I can't do it anymore. The divorce proceedings were surprisingly quick. David didn't fight it, which told Maya everything she needed to know about how much their marriage had really meant to him. They divided their assets with cold efficiency. She kept the apartment, he kept his pride. They both kept their damage. Maya expected to feel lighter once the papers were signed, but instead, she felt hollow, free, yes, but also untethered and uncertain. She'd built her entire adult life around being married to David, and now she had to figure out who she was without that definition. She didn't tell Daniel right away. Part of her wanted to run to him and say, I'm free now. I chose myself. I'm ready. But something held her back. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was fear that too much time had passed, that the moment between them had expired like an unclaimed gift. Daniel noticed the change in her anyway. He always noticed everything about Maya. He saw the absence of her wedding ring, the way she smiled more easily, the lightness in her step that hadn't been there before. He wanted to ask, wanted to know if this meant what he hoped it meant, but he stayed patient, waiting for her to come to him when she was ready. 3 months after her divorce was finalized, Maya finally found the courage. She stayed late at the office, knowing Daniel would too, and walked to his desk as the cleaning crew made their rounds. Can we talk? She asked. Daniel looked up, his heart racing at the vulnerability in her eyes. Always, they went to their cafe, but this time it was closed. So they stood outside in the spring evening, cherry blossoms falling around them like snow. I'm divorced, Maya said simply. I finally did it. I chose myself. Daniel's smile was soft, proud. How does it feel? Scary, Maya admitted. But right, Daniel, I need you to know something. All those months, all that waiting, you were the reason I found the courage to leave. You showed me what it felt like to be truly seen, to matter, and Maya, Daniel interrupted, and something in his voice made her stomach drop. I need to tell you something too. She waited, dread building in her chest. I've been offered a position in London, he said quietly. It's everything I've ever worked for professionally. The chance to build something meaningful, and I accepted it. I'm leaving in 2 weeks. Maya felt the world tilt. 2 weeks? I accepted it 2 months ago, Daniel explained, his eyes pained. I didn't tell you because I'd been waiting so long. Maya, 3 years of loving you from a distance. 3 years of watching you be unhappy and not being able to do anything about it. I thought maybe it was time to stop waiting. Time to build a life that wasn't centered around hoping for something that might never happen. But I'm free now, Maya said, tears streaming down her face. I'm finally free. We can, finally. I know, Daniel said, and his own voice broke. And the timing is cruel, isn't it? You were married and I was patient. I waited too long. And now that you're ready, I've already committed to leaving. They stood there, two people who'd loved each other for years, finally free to be together, but separated by timing and geography and choices made in moments of resignation. Maya wanted to ask him to stay. Daniel wanted to ask her to come with him, but they both knew those requests were unfair. I love you, Maya finally said, the first time she'd spoken those words to him aloud. I've loved you for so long. I love you too, Daniel replied, his hand cupping her face, his thumb wiping away her tears. I've loved you since the first time I saw you pretending to be okay when you were falling apart. And I'll love you in London. And I'll love you in every city I ever live in. Because Maya, you're not the kind of love that fades with distance. Then why does this feel like goodbye? Maya whispered. Because sometimes love isn't enough, Daniel said softly. Sometimes timing matters too. And ours was always just a little bit off. He kissed her then, finally, after years of restraint. It was a kiss that tasted like tears and coffee, and all the conversations they'd never had. It was hello and goodbye wrapped into one heartbreaking moment. It was everything they'd waited for, arriving at exactly the wrong time. 2 weeks later, Daniel left for London. Maya stood in their cafe, alone, drinking coffee that tasted like ash. She thought about all the moments they'd waited, all the time they'd lost being careful and appropriate and patient. She wondered if different choices made at different moments might have led to different endings. The truth was painful in its simplicity. She was married, so he was patient. They waited and waited until they'd waited too long. Love had been there all along, but timing never was. And now they were both free to live their lives apart, carrying the weight of a love that existed perfectly except in time and space. Sometimes the saddest love stories aren't about love ending. They're about love that arrived too late, or waited too long, or simply existed in the wrong moment. Maya and Daniel's story was all of those things. A love that was real and deep and true, but that lived in the painful gap between not yet and too late. And that, Maya realized as she watched rain streak down the cafe window, was perhaps the cruelest kind of heartbreak of all.